ado, I would like to introduce Jeff Downey with Primerica. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm going to get off camera and turn it over to you.
Well, I'm probably not going to say a whole lot because I'm pretty animated, and I got going early this morning, so I'll just stay on my feet most of the time. I'm in pretty good company. Sounds like, I'm not the only one that wants to make sure that people are taken care of with their finances. So a little bit of backstory about myself. I started working when I was 10 years old. I'm from out in central Nebraska, out by Broken Bow. Grew up in a town of about 400 people. My parents run the family business, started in 1976. It is a well business. It's centered around agriculture and domestic well products. So when I was 10 years old, I was running levers on a rig, handing wrenches to the guy I was helping, climbing up windmill towers, stuff like that. So I spent about 4 days a week doing that. Once I was old enough to drive, but maybe not necessarily legally, I could function a standard transmission. I was out working on wells by myself. So I was about 15 years old, going out and doing my own thing. Came down here, my freshman year of college was 2010. Had no idea what I wanted to do. It was always taught, go to school, get good grades, go to college, get good grades, get a good job. And so I knew that, I was a decent student going through high school, kind of slacked off my senior year because I wanted to get into the military. My dad has 7 brothers, so big Catholic family. And of the 8 total brothers, 4 of them were in the military. 3 of them were officers active duty. One of them served in Desert Storm. One of them served in the surge into Iraq. He didn't actually get deployed. His wife was deployed in 2003. She was stationed in Kuwait for 18 months. So in 2009, I had a long conversation with my uncle, and he said, you enlist in the military, you're just going to be a number. Him being a doctor, preparing troops to go to Iraq and at that time Afghanistan as well, he had seen a lot of that. So I decided to forego my enlistment in the Air Force. I was actually scheduled to go to the medical entrance portion of the enlistment process, and the day before I called the recruiter, told him that I was going to go to college. So get down here to school. This is actually where I met my wife. We didn't start dating until after I came home from Afghanistan. I stayed in school for about a year. Had no idea what I wanted to do. Thought it was going to be maybe mechanical engineering because I grew up around that. After a year, I realized I'm not super good at the analytical side of math. Letters and math don't make sense to me. So I went back home. I had a shoulder surgery from an injury in high school that just kind of kept getting put off. I started playing rugby down here and kind of exasperated the injury a little bit. Went back home, worked at a radio station back home for 4 months, my recovery time, and then as soon as I was cleared to go back to work, I started working for Dad. Subsequently, about a month later, I was cleared to be able to go to medical for the military. Talked to the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps said, you had shoulder surgery, we're not going to take you. So I walked across the hall to the Army recruiter's office, and they said, that's not a problem. So filled out the paperwork. About a month later, I went down to Omaha to the MEP station, went through. Everything, as far as I knew, was good until fast forward about 6 months later, I get to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training, and they say, you have some pretty significant hearing loss. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I had no idea. So the commander, who is the audiologist, says, okay, well, we're going to play a tone in your right ear. Tell us when you hear it. So I click the button, right? Seemed fine to me. She plays the tone in my left ear, which was my good ear, and it was much louder. So I'm like, yeah, there's probably something wrong there. So at that point, I'm thinking, oh, my military career is coming to an end, and I've only been in for 3 days. They end up signing a waiver. I go through. That issue didn't come up until we were getting ready to deploy in 2013. As far as me getting into financial services, I was exposed a lot to people within the military who were struggling financially, especially people with spouses and children. They get into the military because they have nowhere else to go, and they know that with the military they're going to have a steady paycheck. Oftentimes they don't change their habits. The military has a multitude of resources that they could tap into and utilize, but it's kind of a pride factor that gets involved. And so they don't seek that help until it's too late, and then what that does is causes stresses on marriages and on careers, and so you see a lot of suffering going on within the military. So I get off active duty in 2015. At that time, my wife Reagan and I were dating, and so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back home, start working to take over the family business. At that point, the military and well work was really all that I knew, and I was pretty decent at the well work side of things. I guess I had 13 years of experience at that point. So went back home, started working for mom and dad, bought a house in the town of Myrna, about 4 blocks away from my parents' home and from the family business. And Reagan and I got married in the summer of 2016. Everything was going good. Started working on slowly building into the business new technology like solar products, things like that. Things that my dad said he was too old to learn. He said, "You're not going to teach an old dog new tricks." I'm not going to do that. He's since learned how to do that. So I guess old dogs can learn new tricks. So we got pregnant with our first son, Axel, about 4 months into our marriage. And I was like, you know what, I've got to do something, right? I knew that I wanted to finish college. And so at that time, Mid-Plains Community College had opened a satellite campus up in Broken Bow. So I started taking business classes through Mid-Plains Community College. And it just didn't feel like my heart was in it, right? Business was all I knew. But at that point, it was kind of like, something just doesn't feel right. And so Reagan is 5 months pregnant, walking through the house. My wife's not a very big gal, so 5 months pregnant, she was about as round as she is tall, right? So she comes walking through the living room, and she could tell that there was something not right. And I was like, I just don't feel like this is the path that I'm supposed to be on. And she's like, well, what path are you supposed to be on then? And I'm like, how much help can I do for someone just by getting a business degree? Like, I get my associate's degree, then at some point I'm going to have to move away from here and finish getting my bachelor's degree. So we had about a 2-hour-long conversation that culminated in her asking, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to help people. And at that point in time, going through everything within the military, Bo Bergdahl was a pretty big military legal interaction that was going on at that time. We had gone out on some missions while I was in Afghanistan that were centered around Bo Bergdahl. And so I had some pretty negative feelings towards that situation, and whatever your feelings are with that, if you're familiar with the situation, that's fine. But I knew that there were individuals within the military that were being taken advantage of, and so I thought that course was getting my law degree, getting back into the military, and then ultimately retiring from the military and opening up my own practice. I knew I was good at arguing, or at least I like to argue, and I wanted to help people, and so I saw some people get some raw deals within the military, and so that was the route I started pursuing. So fast forward a little bit, I finished getting my associate's degree from Mid-Plains. We moved down here to Lincoln. At that time, we had 2 little boys, Axel and Ronan. Ronan wasn't even 1 year old yet. He wasn't walking. He wasn't even crawling when we moved to Lincoln. Now he's a little terrorist destroying everything. We just welcomed our first daughter back in September, and she is learning everything from Ronan, and I am completely terrified. So Reagan got her specialist degree in school psychology. She went to school to be a school psychologist. She worked with the ESU 16 out of North Platte until 2017, she got pregnant with Axel and then decided she was going to be a stay-at-home mom. So when we come down to Lincoln, you know, I had my GI Bill through the military. That was enough to pay for school and the mortgage, but that was pretty much it. We opted to buy a house as opposed to renting because, I mean, let's be honest, here in Lincoln, it's almost cheaper to own your own home than it is to rent, especially when you have 2 kids, and at the time we had 2 St. Bernards. Why we had 2 St. Bernards and 2 kids, I don't know, I guess I'm crazy. But so we buy our home, and it was just like, you know, we've got to do something to be able to at least buy groceries and keep the heat on. So Reagan started substituting for LPS. Going through some of the schools that she went through, you know, she's like, I want to do something from home because this isn't it. I'm going and taking care of other kids' schools, or other kids at these schools, and I feel like I'm neglecting our kids. I had a pretty flexible school workload, so our kids weren't worth the sitter all the time, but it was enough that it was starting to annoy a mom, right? So I think the big kicker for her was, you know, coming from a small town in Nebraska, it's kind of unheard of to have daycares at public schools, and she subbed at Lincoln North Star, and they had the daycare in the school, and she's like, I babysat kids all day. I could have done that at home, you know. So we get to November of 2019, October of 2019, and a gal who had reached out to her that spring when she was looking for things to do for an income once we moved down here, reached out to her again, who was with Primerica, sat down with Reagan. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea who this woman was. I just knew that Reagan was looking for something that she could work remotely with. She sits down with her, has about a 20-minute long conversation, puts the end to it, and says, you need to come look at our financial situation. So I get a phone call. She says, hey, Amanda's coming over. She's going to go through our stuff. And I'm like, hold on, who's Amanda and what stuff? She goes, well, the gal I came to meet with today. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's in the calendar. You know, the great thing about technology today is that my wife can tell me where I'm supposed to be and when just by putting it into my phone from her phone. So that's nice. I was like, yeah, I guess that is in the calendar. Well, who is she? Well, she's the gal that I came to meet with about being able to work from home, you know. I'm like, okay, well, what stuff's she going through? She goes, well, she's going to go through our financial stuff. And I'm like, I'm not letting some stranger come look through my financial stuff, right? Like, we're good. I don't need someone to take a look at what I have going on. And so she's like, she's going to come through. She's like, she showed me an example, and we're on the bad side of it, and blah, 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 just going off. And I'm like, I have to walk into class right now. I'll talk to you when I get home. So sure enough, I pull into the garage, and 5 minutes later, there's this short little blonde gal knocking on the door. I'm like, well, you must be Amanda. Come on in, because Reagan already told me that you're taking our financial stuff. So anyways, as it turns out, when we went through and took a look at everything, we were in a position where we were what my dad referred to as, and I kind of adopted as, insurance poor. So we were spending a lot of money on our insurance premiums, and you know, being a broke college student with a wife who was substitute teaching, that's not a recipe for success. So we sat down, went through everything, ended up saving ourselves $260 a month on our insurance premiums, which for me was a win. And then as I started looking more at the numbers, I was like, well, there's more to this than just saving some money on insurance. Started learning more about the numbers, started learning about all the things that we should learn in high school, right? Like you talk about financial literacy. Why aren't we learning things about how to actually make our money grow? Why are we taught that, you know, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, put our money in the bank, maybe one day we'll retire? And so, like the two of you in the back, my main goal is to sit down and help teach those concepts to our clients so that they don't grow up and go through life thinking that the only way to retire is the 401k at work and money in the bank. especially with what we're seeing with inflation right now. That's just not going to cut it. 0.1% return on your investment at the bank is just not going to work. And so I sit down with anyone from the single mom with 3 kids that is working 3-4 jobs to keep food on the table, to the doctor down the street who doesn't have a care in the world when it comes to finances. Providing them all the same opportunity to actually build and grow wealth and leave a legacy for their family. Growing up, even with my family owning their own business, it wasn't one of those things where we could just drop everything and go on vacation. Working in the ag community, there's a window of time where we can actually get work done that the customers are needing done, right? Because their cows aren't always drinking from the windmill at the same time. They're rotating pastures. The ground's hard, so you can't put pipe in the ground, or things are freezing up on the drilling rig when you're putting in a new well. And so we had a block of time where we could actually get the most amount of work done, and that was coincidentally in the summertime when I had a break from school. So family vacations wasn't a big thing for us growing up. I don't want to paint the picture like we grew up poor or anything like that, but it was a very modest lifestyle. We always had new shoes for school. We always had clothes that didn't have holes in them. Always had coats in the winter time, and always had food on the table. But when we started raising our family, and started growing by marriage, Axel, Ronan, and now Murphy, it became apparent that the way that we wanted to raise our kids was not the way that we were raised. Reagan came from a little bit different background than me. Her parents own her granddad owns the telephone company in Arapahoe, Nebraska. Her great-granddad purchased it back in the early 1900s. And now her dad is running the business and will soon own that as well. A little bit different industry, had a little bit different lifestyle than I had growing up. By and large, both middle-class families. But our goal moving forward is that we're going to change the lives of our kids. They're never going to grow up the way that we did. And if we have anything to do with it, everyone that we come into contact with is going to have the same opportunity that we have. Knowledge is power, and if you're able to do more than just provide a product to the client, and you have value because the concepts that you're teaching to that client is something that they can take with them, not just through their life, but through generations. When I actually connected with Nawaf on LinkedIn, I saw on his profile that he had worked as an interpreter in the Army, and I was like, at that point, I've got to talk to this guy. And so it was probably a 2 or 3 month process before we actually got linked together. We had 2, 3, 4 appointments set up where we were going to sit down and have some coffee, and you start factoring kids into the mix, and nothing ever works out, right? So we finally sat down last week, and through my time in the military, I always became fascinated with learning about different cultures. When I was in Afghanistan, we worked with the German infantry, pretty much the entire deployment. We did work with some other NATO forces while we were there. But interacting with our interpreters, we had 2 interpreters, Asandullah and Fareed, that they were brothers. We were in the northern part of Afghanistan and just up by Mazar-e Sharif, and they were local to Mazar-e Sharif, and so they were very valuable assets to what we were doing up there. And just being able to interact with him, I knew that I had never served in Iraq. If I had a chance to talk with someone who worked with the Army as an interpreter, that was something I wanted to, that was an opportunity I wanted to take advantage of. And so through conversation, I guess at some point, maybe within the last 5 minutes of an hour-and-a-half long conversation, we talked business, and that's when this got brought up, and Nawaf asked if I would be interested in coming and telling my story, and I was be more than happy to. And I don't think there's any value or anything more important than the value that you get from learning about someone else, regardless of what you have to offer, because that feeds into your business. If you know where someone's coming from, and you know that they just want to find a way up, maybe they don't even really know what their goal is for where they want to end up in life because they never experienced it. You can connect with that client on a whole different level, and that's very valuable to any business, regardless of what it is. So I guess that's all I have now. I feel like I went pretty close to 20 minutes. So.
What do you do with your clients? You sit down, give me an example.
Yeah, I'm going to sit now, if that's okay. So the basic premise with everything that we do is that they're not obligated to do business with us. Every consultation that we do is free of charge, which I think holds a lot of value to a lot of people. If I can sit down and put a comprehensive plan together for someone and showing them, okay, this is where you're at financially. This is where you're at with how much you have saved up in the bank, old 401ks or maybe no 401ks, your current retirement plan, what your debt status is, how you're paying those debts off, what you have set up in a wide range of financial options as far as life insurance, home insurance, auto insurance, for small business owners, providing them resources for legal counsel, identity theft, all sorts of things. We actually last summer got into the Medicare side of things, so we provide supplemental coverage to our clients should they choose to do that. And really, instead of pushing something on them, providing them options. And if we can put all of this together and provide them a detailed map, then they know that we provided them the options. What they move forward with is up to them. And really all it requires for them is to follow that path, have the discipline to stick to that path, and know that if they do that, this is where they're going to end up.
Part of that process, how do you help them create a vision or, if you will, look at what their financial legacy can be? Because what you're doing is building something not short term, but long term. How do you help people see that vision, especially if they come at you upside down financially, or as I was raised, you need something to go buy it, don't worry about where the money's coming from.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
That's how it happened. It took me, when I was almost 50 to realize it made no sense. So what's your, I know you let them choose, but you help share any kind of a vision or legacy with them to help towards a legacy that would help them say, yeah, I want to be there in 5 years or 10 years.
Everybody's different. My vision for a financial legacy is going to be different than anyone else's in this room. And it's not necessarily something that they're going to have walking into that first meeting. So for me, it's really building that relationship with them, figuring out, and I guess this is where psychology gets involved, figuring out what motivates them. When I'm talking to someone back home within the ag community, they've pretty much accepted that they're going to be in debt for the rest of their life. They're just going to continue to go to the bank, get a loan to buy that new tractor or whatever the case may be. It's the norm to them. Here in Lincoln, it seems to be a little bit different. Okay, most people aren't owner-operators. I think it was somewhere around 1910, like 95% of the population were all entrepreneurs. And 5% worked for the 95%. Today, those numbers have essentially flipped. So they know that they have the security of their job, and so maybe their financial outlook is different. That farmer and rancher, they want to own their own land. They don't want to have to apply for a loan every year to operate. They don't want to apply for land grants or anything like that, but they have to because they don't have the equity. And so that's where they accept it. Now, you come to this part of the state where most everybody is working for a business here in Lincoln proper. Their outlook's different because they want to own the home. They want to get out of debt. They want to send their kids to college and everything else. So really it's just finding what makes them tick. What are your goals right now? And we can adjust moving forward. Because my relationship with that client isn't just as simple as putting a plan together and providing them options, and if a sale happens, then a sale happens, and then that's it. This is something where I am working through with them on an annual basis, maybe every 6 months, maybe every quarter, to go through and see where they're at and how we can keep moving forward.
I guess as part of your initial discussion, you're sitting on this kind of a coaching, questioning, really finding out where they're at, not only economically, but where they're at with their life and where they want to be, and at least getting through the first year or two of that.
Yeah, so typically my first conversation with them is, this is what I can provide to you. This is the value that I bring to the table. Is this a conversation you want to continue having? Every step of the way is going to be options, yes or no, this or that. If it's someone that they feel like they're comfortable with where they are and they really don't want to take my advice, then that's going to be a diluted relationship right from the beginning. It's going to be very hard to work through with them the process of making sure that they absolve their debt.
Some are fits and some are not fits.
That's right. I can sit down and show you, this is how you're paying your debt off, and I can show you how to turn $300,000 worth of debt that you're going to be paying on for the next 40 years into debt that you only pay on for the next 7 years and avoid $160,000 worth of interest. Oh, by the way, if you invest this money, you're potentially looking at, somewhere between $4 and $5 million in retirement assets once you reach that age. And so whether or not they move forward is completely up to them. And so it's definitely a step-by-step process. First step, this is the value that I provide. Second step, let's put everything together. And then however many steps come after that is really up to them.
I wonder how much of your military experience you take over the clients. Is that different from somebody else that you see?
So that's kind of a loaded question. I've been told from time to time that I'm intimidating. So I try to smile more, I try to joke more when I'm sitting down with someone, whether it's someone that I'm interviewing or a client that I'm sitting down with. I try to make it as lighthearted as possible. I do spend a lot of time being serious because when I'm looking at someone's financial situation and their future, it's a very serious topic. And so if I'm going to take the time to train someone to do what I do and duplicate myself, then I take it seriously. What I've found is that if I'm so serious when I'm talking to them, then there's no opportunity to train them because I already scared them out the door. So that would play a factor. I know as far as our financial situation, when we moved down to Lincoln, we were in the red. Our credit score wasn't that great. Of course, we had just bought, a house and everything. Moving costs money, and so, we had debts and things like that, and a couple car loans. And once again, we weren't making a lot of money. And we completely flipped our financial situation. We drastically improved our credit score, actually built a positive net worth. And we're actually on track to retiring much sooner than what we had anticipated, by about 8 years, which is pretty neat. And so the positive from my military experience is the discipline to stick to the plan, trusting the process and knowing that if we continue to follow these steps, it is going to work. And I don't know that this is probably military. I think I got this from my dad, but probably stubbornness and unwillingness to quit, which Reagan also has. And so that makes any type of conversations, I won't call them arguments, but conversations about how things should be done, pretty interesting in our household. My mom always laughs. She's like, well, if someone tells you can't do something, you're going to go do it. When I was recovering from my shoulder surgery that summer, my brother-in-law works for an auto body shop back home. And he actually grew up about 40 miles down the road from us out on a ranch up in the Sandhills. And he was big into doing demolition derbies. And so they were doing a demolition derby in Broken Bow at the end of the summer, and he's like, I need your help. I have this old, was it a Mercury Montego or something like that, up on the ranch, a big old boat. And he said, that was always going to be my next derby car. And then obviously we got married, started having kids, and that kind of went to the wayside. And so we went up one Saturday, picked up that derby car and brought it back. Well, his old school car was sitting there. It was an old Oldsmobile Toronado, front-wheel drive car, 1984. It was like a tin can. And his stepdad said, well, he goes, when are you going to take that thing? I don't want it anymore. And so we went back. That was kind of the end of the conversation. Went back, started working on this derby car, and I was like, I want to buy the old Toronado and build a derby car. And he says, well, I don't know when we're going to have time to do that, because he and I were both working. I was doing all the welding and stuff. I was pretty good with a welder. He was working on what needs to be done to make this actually a legitimate derby car. And I was like, well, I'll figure it out. I'm working 5 hours a day. I've got plenty of time because we don't start working on this until you come home from work. And so we went up about 3 weeks later. Basically, 3 weeks before the derby, we go up to get this car. And I had no idea what I was doing. I knew I had to knock the windows out, pull all the interior out so it wouldn't catch fire, and do a bunch of other stuff. And so we would work on his car until about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And then as soon as he would leave, I'd finish up welding whatever I was welding on. I'd push his car out. I'd bring my car into the shop and start working on it. And I built that derby car in 10 days. The first 2 days, my dad had no idea I was doing it. I was staying up until about 4 o'clock in the morning working on this derby car because I knew by 5 o'clock he was coming over to make coffee at the shop. And if he saw that parked in the shop, he was going to come unglued because it was in his way. So I'd work on it, push it out, put it back where it was, and then go sleep for a few hours before I went to the radio station. And after day 2, he figured out I was working on this derby car. He's like, you're wasting your time. You're exhausted. You're never going to get this done in time. And I got it done. And I got 3rd place in the demolition derby with a car that shouldn't have. And he walked into the office the day before the derby and he goes, I don't know why he's killing himself. He's not going to get it done. And she goes, you should know by now. If you tell him he's not going to do something, he's going to do it. And so I built that derby car in 10 days, and that's an example I always go back to. I mean, you can tell me I'm not going to be successful in business, and that's just going to fuel my fire. I work off of the negativity. I got screamed at for 3.5 months by drill sergeants telling me that I was less than the dirt that was on the floor that I was supposed to sweep up. And so negativity will fuel me more than positivity will. So.
Did you finish your degree?
I did not. I foregoed finishing my degree.
It's never too late.
It's never too late. You're absolutely right.
36 when I finished mine.
Yeah, I haven't. So I was actually going to school for political science. I was taking a neurological approach to it. So how does the brain come into how people view things politically? I was big into philosophy and psychology, why people think the way that they do, and I think that works its way into this business as well because if someone has a complete negative outlook, I know I've got more work to do on proving to them that they can put themselves in a better situation. And so looking ahead, I still have my GI Bill. I'm on track to completing in 2 years. So I've got more than enough saved up in the GI Bill to be able to do that. And I would like to finish in political science, just to say that I finished what I started. But right now, the main thing is the main thing. And I told someone that I was interviewing, this is about a month ago now, if I'm really going to have the impact that I want to have, I need to have 10,000 clients over the next 10 years. And this is one instance where I identified where I intimidated someone, because he kind of sits back in his chair and he goes, well, that's a lofty goal. And I looked at him and I said, well, maybe it is for you, but it's not for me. And, we had about a 10-minute long conversation after that. And that was pretty much it. And so I know I scared that guy off, but that's okay.
Any other last comments and questions? Well, thank you so very
appreciate
much
it.
for being here. Here is a token of our appreciation.
Oh, awesome.
Perk Up Thursday, Focus Sweets mug.
Perfect.
Please, everybody, feel free to stay around, have more coffee. This is the last week you're going to get Nawaf's coffee, so you better enjoy it, because next week you're going to get mine, and I can't make coffee. So.
I didn't know you were the coffee guy, so I'm going to have a cup now.
Yes.
So.
Thank you to Community Development Resources for providing us with the Canyon coffee. Next week we will have Megan McGuffrey from Community Crops, so please come back to that or tune in via Zoom, and we will see everybody next week. Thank you.